Today's Take 5 with the Saints, March the 13th, is James Theodore Augustus Holly. Had to look to make sure I got the words in the right order. A large name for a larger-than-life man. He was the first African-American bishop in the Episcopal Church and the second of any major denomination in the United States. He was ordained a priest, but became not just the bishop of any diocese in this country, but traveled as essentially a missionary and ultimately became ordained as the bishop of Haiti, a diocese and a church very important, particularly to us, the people of St. Stephen's, who have had a ministry relationship with the Haitian church for over 25 years. So he is a particularly relevant saint for our life here as the people of St. Stephen's. The scripture that goes with his feast day comes out of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 20 through 25. When your children ask you in time to come, what is the meaning of the decrees and the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord our God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your children, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. The Lord displayed before our eyes great and awesome signs and wonders against Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his household. He brought us out from there in order to bring us in to give us the land that he promised on oath to our ancestors. Then the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our lasting good, so as to keep us alive, as is now the case. If we diligently observe this entire commandment before the Lord our God as he has commanded us, we will be in the right. James Holly was born as a free African-American man in Washington, D.C. in 1829. He ultimately was baptized and confirmed in the Roman Catholic Church, but he became an Episcopalian as a young adult. He was ordained a deacon in St. Matthew's, Detroit in 1855, and ordained a priest in Connecticut in 1856, and for the next 5 years served as the rector of St. Luke's in New Haven, Connecticut. Yes, the same town where now Yale University is prominent. That same year, he founded a society which became the forerunner of a group that is a very powerful ministry within the Episcopal Church to this day, the Union of Black Episcopalians, except it was named by him the Protestant Episcopal Society for promoting the extension of the church among colored people. Ultimately, obviously, the title got shortened, but it spelled out exactly what its mission was. They wanted the church to reach out and include more African American people. So while he was the rector at New Haven, he also started that ministry. During his time at New Haven, he became particularly close with Frederick Douglass, and they often worked together on many projects collaboratively. But in 1861, notable as that was the start of the Civil War, he resigned from St. Luke's and joined a group of African Americans who decided to go to Haiti. Now, Haiti, by that point, had become an independent state. The African slaves that had been brought into Haiti by the French had risen up in revolt and had gained their independence from their French colonial masters, but were still struggling to find their way both politically but also religiously as a free state. So Holly and a group traveled to Haiti. He went with his entire family, and in the first year of being there, his wife, his mother, and 2 of his 4 children died during that first year. But he wrote, staying on with his 2 small sons who survived, he said this, "Just as the last surviving apostle of Jesus was in tribulation on the forlorn isle of Patmos, so by his divine providence Christ had brought this tribulation upon me for a similar end in this isle in the Caribbean Sea." He was beloved by the Haitian people. He was one of their own as an African descent after all. He spoke of God's love and spoke of God's love particularly for them in their hardships. 13 years later, November 8th, 1874, he traveled back to the United States and was consecrated as the first ever bishop of the Diocese of Haiti at Grace Church in New York City, again making him the first black man to be a bishop anywhere in the Episcopal Church. In addition to serving faithfully his diocese in Haiti, he was invited in 1878 to attend the Lambeth Conference, which was the every decade conference held by the Archbishop of Canterbury for every bishop in every province of the Anglican Communion. And he became the first black bishop anywhere to come to Lambeth, and during that occasion he was invited to preach at Westminster Abbey on the feast of St. James that year. His success was registered not just in the love of his people, but in the statistics. The size of his diocese doubled. Medical clinics, one of which, while he was not started well after his time, but in the vein of the ministry that was important to Haiti, medical clinics, St. John the Evangelist Medical Clinic and School and Church, which is in Petit Harpon, Haiti, where we do the bulk of our ministry at St. Stephen's, was inspired by the fact that medical clinics were also a huge part of his ministry in establishing health physically and spiritually for the people under his watch. He continued to serve in Haiti, as well as also becoming, toward the end of his ministry in 1897, the bishop of the Diocese of the Dominican Republic. So he had episcopal authority over the entire island of Hispaniola until his death in 1911. He was laid to rest on the ground of what is now St. Vincent's School for Handicapped Children in Port-au-Prince. The Episcopal Diocese of Haiti, through all that the people of Haiti have been through, natural disasters, political and military upheaval, it still remains, number of population, the largest diocese in the Episcopal Church. And James Hawley's work as the first African American bishop, but also as a man whose very great administrative and pastoral skills helped to make that a strong church with a strong legacy of preaching the gospel of love to all the people in Jesus Christ's kingdom. And for that we have much to thank and celebrate as we continue his work as people who also tried to proclaim God's love to the people of Haiti, as they too proclaim God's love to us and share in that wonderful ministry and fellowship. So, I'll stop because I can say a lot more about Bishop Hawley. Thank you for joining me. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care.